Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you all had a really good break as discussed in class, and as you should have read via an announcement through the class and or an email that I did send you guys. It is a very real possibility that the remainder of this class could be conducted online. Currently, right now, with the state of our country, right, the state that we're in with the virus going around, Kirkwood has us online until April 10th. Okay, they're going to reassess on April 10th, right, and decide if we should go back to regular classes or if we should continue online. I very much anticipate that we will be online for the rest of the semester. Okay, just with the virus going around, I can't imagine it's just going to die out. So I would anticipate we will be online for the rest of the semester. Okay. So be prepared for that. Adjust, right? Things are going to be a little bit different, as I mentioned. I'll be giving these kind of online, very short lectures where we'll talk about information, and then we'll have some application, and we'll have some discussion boards as well. Okay. So for this week, we will be talking about group and team communication. This really is kind of a shame. We were just starting to work in our teams, in our groups, right? Getting ready for our group speeches, which would have been the last thing we did for the class, which to me is the most fun part about this class. I get to see groups come together, work through problems, and deliver a final product. Right? So this information would have been very, very valuable to you and your groups, right? So hopefully we'll still get to do those. Hopefully we will get back to school before the end of the year. If we do, this information will be very valuable to you guys moving forward. If we don't, this is still really valuable information for you guys to take out into the real world, right? Whenever you're working in groups and teams, right? Especially when you're working a job, right? And you have to work with other people, okay? So let's dive in. The first distinction I want to draw is a distinction between groups and teams, right? So a group is a collection of individuals who influence one another, have a common purpose, take on roles, are interdependent, and interact. Right? So we can group people together, right? If you think about the way we group people in society, right, by their occupation or maybe their race, right, or certain characteristics. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about groups in this sense, right? We're talking about groups that interact, right? They actually interact with one another and they have a common purpose, meaning they're probably working towards the same goal, right? So we're all trying to be pulling in the same direction. And they're also interdependent, right? That word inter, right? So that means what I do depends on what my group member does and vice versa. Okay? Now a team is a special form of group that is characterized by close-knit relationships among people with different and complementary abilities and a strong sense of identity. Okay? So all teams are groups, right? All groups are not teams. A team is a type of group. Okay? A couple important things to note about teams, right? Close-knit relationships, right? So these people, they enjoy being around each other. They get to know each other very well, and they often perform at a very high level. Right? They have different and complementary abilities, right? That word complementary, right? So that means where my weaknesses are, right, my group member might have a strength. So drawing back on my college days when I played college soccer, right? If my team, right, let's say I was the coach of a college soccer team, if I recruited a bunch of players who all played goalkeeper, do you think we'd be a very good team? Right? Probably not, right? So I'm going to recruit goalkeepers, left backs, right backs, center mids, outside mids, forwards, right? I'm going to recruit all these different positions. Why? They all have different skill sets and they complement each other, right? So I need somebody to play left mid, right? So I'm going to look for somebody who's maybe pacey, really serves a good ball, is crafty, right? But it's also very, very important that I have somebody who's maybe really good in the air, can win headers, and is really good tactically, and can figure out where the team needs to be organized in certain ways, right? So their abilities are very, very different, right? So they're complementary, right? Where one person's weaknesses are, the other person has strengths. Okay. The other concept on this slide that I want you guys to take away is this concept of non-summativity, right? This is kind of a odd term, non-summativity, right? So what this means is that when it comes to high-performing groups and teams, right, the output of the group is more than the sum of its parts. So if you think about math, think about addition. 2 plus 3 plus 4, right? That equals 9, right? That's summativity. That's the sum, right? 2 plus 3 plus 4. The sum is 9, right? Now, non-summativity is saying the opposite. Non-summativity, right? The sum is more than the collection of its parts. So, my abilities, my teammates' abilities, my other teammates' abilities, right? If we add all those things up, right, what all we could accomplish separately and then added them together at the end, we would not accomplish as much as if we were to all sit down and collaborate and work together. Okay? So non-summativity. Our output is worth more than the sum of its parts. Okay? So now we're going to talk about Tuckman's group formation and development stages. Okay? So forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Okay? Again, forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. So stage 1 is forming. This is when you're first meeting your group or team members, right? You're trying to get to know them. Right? You're trying to answer the question, who is this person? Ideally, you're trying to figure out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what motivates them. How can you force them, encourage them, right, to act in a way that would be very beneficial to the group? How can you use their strengths to the group's best interest? Okay. Stage 2 is storming. Okay. This is likely when differences are going to arise within the group. Right? At this point, there might be some tension. Right? You might witness a power struggle of some sort. Right? Stage 3 is norming. This is when the group figures out their roles, right, and rules within the group. Right? So every group, right, they have a certain set of norms that they should act by. Right? Expectations for group members. Right? This is what happens in the norming phase. The group openly talks about these things and figures out, right, what is appropriate behavior for each group member. The 4th stage is performing, right? So this is when you're actually performing the task that you came together to perform. So, if we were talking about our group speeches, right, when you would be in stage 4, performing, it would be when you're actually up in front of the class presenting to the class. And then the 5th stage is adjourning. This literally just means the group dissolves. They've accomplished their purpose and they go their separate ways. Right? So that's stage 5. So back here with stage 3, when we talked about norming. Right? We're going to talk about group norms now. There's 2 types of norms. Okay? There's formal norms and informal norms. And again, we are trying to, as intelligent people, we're seeking to take complex concepts and make them simple. Right? So, formal norms. Those are rules that are explicitly stated. Right? So, if I sit down with my group and I say, hey, when work is assigned, it is going to be a rule that we have that work accomplished within a week. Right? So when we meet back up, right, we can talk about what we did, what we accomplished, and set new goals for the group. We explicitly stated it, right? That is now a formal norm. Okay? Informal norms aren't this. Informal norms are implied rules or norms, right? So, informal norms, some very basic, general informal norms that I would assume almost every group would abide by. We're not going to physically hurt other group members. We're not going to be openly hostile, right, intentionally towards other group members, right? Those are things that are just kind of implied, right? Nobody ever explicitly states them. Nobody ever writes them down on paper, right? Instead, it's just the group kind of agrees, hey, yeah, this is something that the group is going to do and a rule that they're going to abide by. A few characteristics of high-performing small groups, right? So we already talked about interdependence, right? So what I do affects my group members and vice versa. The second one is commitment. High-performing groups often have group members who all have a similar level of commitment to the group. So if you think about some of maybe the worst groups that you've been in when it comes to either high school or your short experience in college, the worst groups you've been in are probably groups where you felt like maybe you had to do all the work. You felt like work was unequally distributed, and maybe that was because other group members maybe weren't competent enough, right? Maybe you didn't trust them enough, or maybe they just weren't committed to the group. They just didn't care, right? So you were way more committed, they weren't committed. And so that causes tension, right? So high-performing groups tend to have a similar level of commitment between each group member. Okay?